Okay. Thank everybody for being here tonight. It has actually been a while since we have come together for a budget workshop. Our last was on February 8th. We were scheduled to have one for March, but we had really no new information in March. So we deferred until our April meeting, and then we even postponed that by 2 days because we all know the budget was enacted late last week, and we really needed some time to digest and work through that. Hopefully a number of you got to sit through the NISPA webinar today, which was kind of a upper level statewide perspective. Hopefully we can take that same concept today and share with you what that means for us here in Menands. Kathy and I have had the opportunity to sit through numerous webinars and conversations with our organizations as well as with our local colleagues within the BOCES, and have learned a lot in the last couple of days. Hopefully we can convey all of that to you tonight. I was just saying to Kathy before we started tonight, we're in a really different place than we were this time last year. We were coming off a lot of not knowing. We still have some not knowing, but a lot of the news is good news, both from a foundation aid and our own budget perspective, and also the other funding and opportunities that are going to be available to us through some other things. So we have put together a presentation for you tonight. The first part is really focused on our budget development, separate and apart from the federal funding, because they are two different things. But I know some of those things are important and are intriguing to folks, especially the inclusion of some UPK money. So I have put 2 slides after the budget presentation to tell you what we know about that and where we will go with that. So what I would like to go ahead and do is pull up the budget presentation, share my screen, and go through it in its entirety, and then we can circle back to any questions. Will that work for everybody?
Yep.
All right, let me get back to my sharing. All right, you see my screen again? Just give me a thumbs up because I do not see all of you now. Okay, perfect. Now let's see if I can get that to move. Okay, so the first several slides you're going to see are not going to be new to you. Keeping in mind, we will budget from what we know to be true at this moment in time, my mantra since I've been here. And there is no doubt things will change, and they certainly have since we last came together. Despite any changes and despite our circumstances and even the circumstances we were in last year and moving through this year and into next year, what will shape our process also shouldn't change. What do our students need from a social emotional perspective? What do we want from our students from a program perspective? And how can we manage all the moving pieces and parts to accommodate both of those? Further shaping what we will do this year is our recently adopted overarching goals, which are now in the hands of our strategic planning committee. So I want to go back to where we left off on February 8th. This was the slide in the February 8th presentation of all those things that we still weren't sure of. And let's start by looking at the top of the page and the expenditures. So while all of these things can and likely will change to some extent between now and the end of the year and between now and the beginning of next year, we have tightened them up to the extent we can at this moment in time. And again, what we know to be true at this moment in time, and have developed this draft 2 budget around the figures we have available to us at this point in time. So though they will change slightly, and perhaps more than slightly, there has to come a point where we draw a line in the sand and develop our budget. And this is that point, knowing that we have to adopt next Wednesday. On the revenue side, we have learned a tremendous amount since we last came together around both state and federal aid. And 2 items are listed here, though there were more that were proposed in the governor's budget that may have had a significant impact, and that's the STAR exemption and the consolidation of service aids. I really have to applaud the board. I have to applaud our BOCES legislative committee. I have to applaud our elected officials and really the elected officials statewide, because I think what came out in the enacted budget was truly a reflection of our advocacy and their advocacy on their behalf. First and foremost, the idea of the foundation aid funded to 60%. So you know from my communications with you that we were one of 59 districts who were below that 60% statewide. We were one of only 3 districts locally, us, North Colony, and Niskayuna. And I will share that we were the lowest funded. We were funded at only 30% of what we were owed in foundation aid. We collectively advocated with our 2 other local districts, and that surfaced in the budget that was enacted. For us, that is a big win. We have been on an uneven playing field since 2008. This at least takes us equal to our counterparts. So thank you for your advocacy in that regard. In addition to that, not only are those districts who will be funded, who weren't funded up to 60%, all districts are now slated to receive the full phase-in foundation aid over the next 2 years beyond this year. Now, I am very excited about that. I am very enthusiastic, but I am cautiously so. We've been made these promises in the past. So while I will continue to be cautiously optimistic, I will believe it when I see it. Also, resulting from our advocacy and from our continued work, transportation reimbursement that there was questions about was taken care of in the enacted budget. Access to broadband was addressed, maybe not to the extent that we had hoped, but we're in a better place than we were. As I indicated on the prior slide, there will not be a consolidation of the service aids, which in turn impacts the reduction to reimbursement aids, and there are no changes to STAR. In addition, on the table in the governor's budget were some changes to charter schools. None of those came to fruition. So when we left in February, what you were anticipating at the next meeting, and this is the next meeting, is our updated parameters. You should have all received those both electronically and in paper format today. Any information out of the governor's and the Capitol or the governor's office, and we have a lot of that. And then our 2021-2022 draft budget, we have all of those to share with you tonight. Relative to the parameters, I think the last time we met, there were asterisks on only a couple of these. This time there are asterisks on all of those, and that means you will see changes in that updated document you received, and all those changes are indicated in red. And those changes were anticipated. They're really just a result of doing business as usual, for less of a better word. So we have updated enrollment projections. Special education, you know, this is the time of the year that we are going through our annual review processes. So many of those have been updated to better reflect what we should expect next year. We've had changes to our English language learners, in our McKinney-Veno students, in transportation. We always get at this point in the year updated information regarding tuition from our high schools, and that's been updated. Staffing has not changed. We did not anticipate that it would, and other expense factors. I think where I would really want to draw your attention, if I could, and we will revisit this, is page 5 of the parameters, which talks about the revenue side of things, and where there's really a difference in the enacted budget this year and the additional supports available compared to last year. So the great news is the foundation aid money, which we've already talked about. And that is monies that we will include as state aid and will be incorporated into the budget that the board will adopt. One of the big differences is the federal funding that we are getting this year through the Recovery Act comes to us through a special aid fund, grant and aid, so to speak. So that is money we are going to have to apply for. There are certain hoops we're going to have to go through, and I'm willing to go through any hoop we have to get the funds that are available to us. However, they will sit outside and a part of our regular budget, and we'll talk more about that. The other piece of that, and similarly, is the UPK money. We are thrilled to have that money and that opportunity. We need to learn a lot more about what that means, and that again will not sit in our regular budget. That goes through a grant process. Last year's CARES money sat in the process. Okay, Bill, it looks like you have a question. Yes?
Just quickly, second time, UPK is what?
I'm sorry, universal pre-K.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So here's the information out of the governor's office. And it really should look very similar to what we've seen in the past. So what you have on this side, and on this slide, is a side-by-side comparison of what the governor's budget had in it originally and the enacted budget. There's a couple of lines I want to draw your attention to. The top line being the big one. Huge increase in our foundation aid. Again, much deserved, and we've been without it for many years, so it levels the playing field. And then the second one is that UPK money, Universal Pre-K bill, that is in the enacted budget, but it's a little bit of a misnomer. So notice the red circle I just put around the bottom of the page, again addressing the federal funding, and it's the COVID-19 Supplemental Stimulus Act, or the CSA, and the ARP, or the American Recovery Plan. Again, we love seeing those dollars. Those dollars sit separate and apart from really the work we have to do tonight to adopt a budget. But that said, I will talk about them in more detail after we talk budget. Every year, once we get the enacted budget, we know there are portions of that that are based on data either from November or January, depending on when the budget is adopted. That will change based on our reality. So here you have the exact same thing you saw on the last slide in the first two columns. The third column is the adjustments that Kathy makes based on our true reality at this moment in time in Menands, and information that wouldn't have been available to the Department of Budget when they calculated these numbers. So again, the first big change you see between column 2 and column 3 is we have taken out or pulled out the UPK money because that sits separate from our budget and we'll have to do a grant application for that. The other differences you see just below the red UPK money is the BOCES aid. You will remember that BOCES aid is generated in the subsequent year based on expenses in the current year. So we have some additional purchases that are slated for and will be made during the remainder of this year that will bump up our BOCES aid that came out in the budget. Again, it's an expense-based aid. This is one of the big reasons we didn't want that all those aids lumped together into a service aid, because that would have frozen that. Any chance we have to generate revenue, we want to generate revenue. This is one of the few places we can do that. The next line is the transportation aid. And again, that's based on our very careful scrutiny over the course of this year on what we are actually expending in transportation. And because of the circumstances, we have transported in some cases a little bit less. That's not the case with our special ed runs, but overall, based on the enacted budget and the fact that it's an expense-based aid and what we've spent and anticipate spending, that will be a little bit of a reduction. If you look at those two lines together, they almost offset one another. And then the last two are down towards the bottom, the public excess high cost aid and the private excess high cost aid. And that has to do with the true placement of our students and the programs they are in and what we are entitled to because of that. And again, one almost offsets the other. So really the big difference we're seeing is that $108,000. So it is a little bit misleading, but not unexpectedly so. And again, I list here on this slide all those things we just talked about, pulling out the UPK money, the adjustments based on actual transportation costs we anticipate, the offset in the public and private excess cost aid. And actually, let me go back if I can for 1 second. The other thing I want to point out is from the governor's run to where we are now, a significant difference in building aid. Again, we anticipated that. That had to do with us finishing out the project and now generating the aid on the project. Okay. So we talked a lot about the foundation aid. If you look at the gray box at the top of this page, this talks about next year in particular. So we are owed, or we are due, just over $1.3 million in foundation aid. Up until now, we were only getting 33% of that. The enacted budget takes us to 60%. So 60% of what we are owed is that $836,014. Okay. What Kathy went ahead and did too is show you what we have been promised in 22-23 in the blue box and in 23-24 in the yellow box. And in essence, that's the remaining 40% split over 2 years. The good news about this, if this really happens as they're promising it, is that this is not one shot. This will live with us forever. That said, we've been made that promise before. We were told we were going to be fully funded in 2008. It didn't happen. Interestingly enough, it didn't happen because the governor at the time, Elliot Spitzer, had himself in a little bit of hot water, and a little bit fearful of history repeating itself.
Yeah, we're at that door again in a lot of ways.
Right? So again, I hope for the best, but we have to plan accordingly. The only thing we are really certain of right now is this $836,000 for next year.
We'll take it.
Absolutely, we'll take it. So I wanted to review with you where we were last time and then tell you where we are now. So in our draft 1 budget, our expenditures were at just over $10 million. Our revenues were at just over $9 million, leaving us an existing gap of just over $900,000. We went, remember, the board has agreed to, and I have heard nothing different, that we've seen the pitfalls of not going to our allowable cap. This year, our allowable cap is only 0.31 or $22,000. So the draft 1 budget and the draft 2 budget I share with you tonight are both going at that 0.31 cap. So we went ahead and we applied the same historical adjustments we have, because remember, we have to present a balanced budget. Our expenditures need to match our revenues. So there's 2 ways to do that. You can reduce expenditures. That means taking away programs or opportunities for our kids, or you increase your revenues. And one of the ways we can increase our revenue is applying fund balance to fill that gap. Historically, we've done that with $815,000 and change from the assigned fund balance and another $50,000 from reserves, or just over $865,000. I want to remind those folks who have been on the board for quite some time, our goal has always been, at the direction of our fiscal advisors, that when we have the opportunity to do so, we should pull back on that use of fund balance. Remember, years back when I first joined the board, we were hoping to get that down to 660 from 800. We had to go up to the 865. So we should be looking at that when we have the opportunity to do so. What was included in that draft budget was everything we are currently doing for kids. Also included in there was COVID materials and supplies and PPE that we anticipated needing moving forward. A big piece, I think, for the board was the professional development, especially the professional development aligned with our goals. We had hoped to commit to that 2 years ago. We had to pull it out. It was in there this year to cover those, addressing those goals and the professional development that go along with them. Also included in draft 1 was the continuation of the technology support that we added mid-year this year. That was the additional IT support from South Colony for both day-to-day technology support and service because of the wear and tear on our technology that our kids are using on a regular basis, as well as some oversight from their tech director. So now I'm going to share the draft 2 budget, or tonight's proposal, with you. Draft 2 budget takes the expenditure budget a bit higher, not significantly, but it also takes the revenue budget higher as well. The existing gap then decreases in totality And I want to point out here, we did make an adjustment, but going back to what I said a few minutes ago, keeping in mind our hope to eventually reduce the amount of fund balance. So instead of applying the 865 that we historically have, this one takes that down to 800,000 of fund balance, again at the allowable cap of 0.31, and we have no gap. So let me tell you though, why and how draft 2 is a little bit different, okay? So not only does it include the technology needs that we had in draft 1, but it also addresses a number of the recommendations that have come out of the audit of the state controller around technology and data security. And it is heavy in technology. I'm going to be honest with you. We had kids taking home Chromebooks that weren't historically taking home. We've got some wear and tear. We have worked hard with our new tech person from South Colony to identify our needs to replace and then get into a replacement plan. So there's some additions to technology in the draft 2 budget to address the OSC audit and to address our immediate needs and to be forward thinking with a replacement plan. Also, since we last met, and we know this is often the case, we have had a new student enroll with significant special ed needs and an out-of-district placement. We anticipate that student will be with us, so that is incorporated in this budget. Anticipated increased transportation costs. Some of that, much of that comes from the annual review process and the identification of the locations that we are going to need to transport students next year. And also included, which the desire of the board is to continue to extend the growth we've made in communication, and it takes our communications folks from BOCES and moves us to the next tier of that. I think we've done a really good job with working towards communicating, and I would love to see us be able to take that to the next step. I think we have some opportunity to do that. What draft 2 also does is it reallocates some things. So I mentioned to you that the federal funding is going to be separate and apart. That said, we have learned a tremendous amount about those things that we will be able to include in the federal funding. And we have been advised in all of the meetings we've sat through and by all of the experts to be very strategic about where you put things and put them where you can maximize dollars. Again, if there are places we can put purchases to maximize revenue through BOCES, we want to do it. If there are places we could move something that would typically sit in our regular budget that may be one-time or short-term purchases that we can do under the federal funds, we want to do that. So the first bullet item under reallocations here is a good example. We had a significant chunk of PPE in our own budget for next year that we knew we would need. We now know that that will put a small dent in what we can purchase under the federal funds. So we took that out of our general fund budget, and we are going to move that into the federal funds. Also, in reallocations, there are minor adjustments based on the most current information, and I'll draw your attention back to your parameters. So those things that we have learned or we know since we last met. We mentioned a special ed placement. We've got now our insurance rates. We know we have a better sense of our tuition rates. So just those small tweaks and adjustments are reflected in the draft 2 budget. And also, as I said on the prior slide, this draft does reduce the historic adjustment by about $65,000 to delve less into the fund balance. So what I did for you here on this slide is we put the two side by side, so you would have a better sense of where we're at. Again, I guess I'll wrap up like I started before I opened it up to questions. I think we find ourselves in a far better place right now this year than we did last year. We are fortunate that we have seen some movement in the foundation aid. We are fortunate that we have some other options available to us. I think it gives us an opportunity to do everything we want to do for our kids, and be reasonable and to our tax-paying public with that 0.31 tax increase. And my recommendation to the board is that we have a discussion around adopting this draft 2 budget. So with that said, let me stop sharing for a minute because I know you all have a copy, and open it up to any questions or comments you may have.
Do we have a lot of spending to do with BOCES for the rest of the year? I know we're in April, mid-April, what have you. On the docket, is it like, 200,000? Is it 50,000? What do we have left for
And I'll
BOCES?
let Kathy chime in a second. So that the aid that you see reflected in the presentation is based on what we anticipate we spend. I'm going to go back to what I said a few minutes ago, where we want to be very strategic about what we purchase and how we purchase it and where. And this was one of the things Kathy and I had a lot of conversation about, and we talked to Bernie Donegan's office. We talked to a lot of other people. I mentioned this is a technology heavy budget. There are things we need to replace because of wear and tear, not because of misuse, just because of use, and things approaching end of life. So we could have considered saying, we'll wait and we'll put all of that technology money into the federal funding, and that would be an allowable cost. But here's where we have to be strategic and look long term. If we make those purchases through BOCES this year, that generates aid for us for next year. So we really took a big chunk of that technology, and that's really a lot of the remaining purchases we will make through BOCES this year. The only unknown through BOCES at this point is if we continue to have special ed placements through BOCES.
Okay. I was just curious, just more from the standpoint of how much we have left to go, if there's a number, or is it a huge number? Is a little bit left? I mean, you don't have to give me an exact number, Cal.
Well, if you look at that aid number, keep in mind we have about we're right around 53%, so use 50. So if we're looking at an additional 35,000 in aid, think of that as 70,000 in purchases.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Bill.
Hello.
Hello.
I have a few questions. Help me out understanding a few extra things here.
Sure.
The transportation number.
On which slide, Bill?
I'm actually looking at our, what do we call them, pages 1 through 6 here?
Our parameters, yep.
Parameters, yeah, right. This year budget we're in now was the year that we increased because of the contract. We already increased this year's operating budget by the 263,000, I think it is, for transportation, but we didn't use it all.
Yeah, well, we used a lot more than you would think when we get to special ed, but go ahead.
You're showing a projected number of 594,000. We approved in the budget for this year $927,000. Where would that money be, the difference?
So that money, the difference would be anywhere any difference would be at this point in time. So let me take you back to last year. We always, I won't say always, typically we will have money remaining for any number of reasons. This is a perfect example of that. Transportation this year is not what transportation will be next year, okay? So we will have some pot of money left at the end of the year, whether it be from transportation or lack of expenses elsewhere. You know, we didn't run some things this year that we typically have run that have a cost associated with them. What we will need to do when we get to June and know what those figures really are is determine what we will do with that remaining money. We've already started to have those conversations with our auditors and with Bernie Donegan's office. So one of the things that the board has been very proactive about is forward thinking. So the last several years, we've taken remaining funds and we've said, let's look to where we can put them into reserve funds that will best position us moving forward. Perfect example is the TRS reserve. That came to fruition. We fully funded it to the level we could. We fully funded it again last year. My first recommendation, if there are funds left, would be to fund that reserve to the extent we can. The other thing I think we really have to look at as far as taking any remaining funds and putting them into a reserve would be a repair reserve. We have a 5-year building condition survey that we just received. You'll be hearing about that in detail in June from both our architects and from our fiscal advisors. And there are going to be things that can wait until debt falls off and we can do another project. There are going to be things that maybe can't, and we want to put some money into a reserve that we can use for those purposes should we need to. So we certainly want to look with any remaining funds to maximize our reserves. At the same time, there are things that we have wanted for a very long time that we haven't been able to budget for because of our circumstances. And let me take you back a year again. We needed some repairs to the basketball hoops in the gym. We really wanted to do that. When we were weighing all of the things we had to do for kids and trying to prioritize them, we couldn't put that in the budget. However, when we got to the end of last year, we had remaining funds and we were able to do that. There are things like that still on the table. You know, our maintenance department of 3 has been doing a tremendous job this year. And their last tractor bit the dust. Would I love to put a tractor in there and replace that in the budget? Yes. Could we do that given the circumstances? No. If there is money remaining at the end of this year, would I like to see that happen? You bet. There are things like, you know, redoing the gym floor. That's been a discussion that we've wanted to have. And I'll even go so far as, and Bill, I've got another guy coming to give me hopefully a better quote tomorrow, the electronic sign. So will there likely be monies as we approach the end of the year? Yes. One of the intricacies of school budget is just take that and move it into next year. It doesn't work that way. What we can do is position ourselves for the future through reserves and look at those things that maybe we wanted in the budget and couldn't get it in the budget, but can get it done. Did that answer your question?
100%. And that, I assume, then goes for some of the other things that were not, that we budgeted for the current year that were not fully percented. One of them was, I don't know if it was healthcare or one of the teacher benefits, retirement system percentage was off, right? That's a different amount, so it's lower. So all that extra money, we won't know until June.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say is even though we have, you know, there are places where we spent less than we anticipated, there's also places that we spent more. Kathy came up with a list today. Kathy, you want to hand me that list? You know, one of the big things is just PPE. You know, we did on that additional cleaning this year because it was the right thing to do, but we hadn't necessarily budgeted for it. We have had additional maintenance support in place this year to meet all of our protocols. That comes at the cost. The basketball hoop, we got those done last year, but then we had to run the electric to get them to go up and down this year. And then, you know, BOCES, we did end up spending more this year than we had originally anticipated we would because of again, a special ed placement. So I'm not saying we're not going to have money left, but I just don't know that it's going to be as much as we could. And yeah, and then the other big one is we took a big hit on charter schools this year. Big increase in number of students attending charters.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that more, but let me go into a couple other things quick and then I'll let someone else speak. I don't want to take the whole night, right? Our building project's finished and our current payment that we make on that amount, 850,000, 840,000, something like that. Out of that, the 400,000 is coming back in building aid. We didn't lose that, correct? Or is that an accurate number?
The building aid number is now an accurate number.
Okay.
We
good.
haven't lost anything. Remember, we were very strategic in when
I just want to make, we hit that December 31st deadline.
Correct.
We're good.
Yeah.
Books closed and the aid will flow. There's no hold up on
That's why
that.
that number was 15,000 in the governor's, and now it's 460 and change.
Okay. I noticed on the draft proposal and the things you said, we are good on staff. I got to ask again, right? COVID, right? Emotional welfare of not only children, but the teachers, administration, the social workers, everyone else that works in that building. are we in a good place staff-wise to possibly cope with issues arising from COVID emotional needs in our district?
So I'm going to answer that two ways. Yes, but we could always do more. And this is going back to our strategy, Bill, and the federal funds that are available to us in the amount of $1.1 million. And I'm going to get to that slide in a couple of minutes. So we could certainly, I'm going to anticipate we're going to have kids that come back needing some additional assistance. We'll know that better after we assess all of those kids, which we are actually in the process of doing next week. What we have, the monies that are available through the federal funds are not a one-shot 1 year. They go over 4 years, and actually we have to space them over 4 years.
Right. Yeah, I saw that in the NISBA. Yeah.
Through 2024. So the best strategic way to use our monies, if we have $1.1 million there, we do identify that we need people, we can use that funding to support those people. And we're not making assumptions based on information we don't have. So we know we have this pot of money that's going to be available immediately. We know we can use it for staff, and we know 20% of it has to be dedicated to learning loss. That's something you'll see on a slide I give you in just a minute. So I think the answer to your question is, I feel very confident doing business as usual. And even with some of the challenges we faced this year, again, and I said this at the last meeting, because of the work we've done over the last several years to build staff and capacity, that we have what we need. What I'm pretty excited about is if I'm wrong, or if we have kids that come back with needs, we have a funding source over the next 4 years that sits outside of our budget to allow us to address that.
Two last questions. Thank you, Dr. Long. And I know in the past we've had, and this year, I know there's money being set aside for curriculum and development, things like that. Is it time to discuss or look at getting an embedded staff developer back on board?
Right now, and actually just starting this week, we are doing a significant amount of work with BOCES on the next generation standards and curriculum development. We started this yesterday at a faculty meeting, actually, Bill, to do the heavy lift of that. And we have dedicated our staff meetings both for the remainder of this year, and that's 2 a month, and some summertime with that professional development and curriculum work. I think we're going to land in a really good place with that. But again, if we find ourselves needing more, there's monies there outside of the budget to help us address that. Everybody sitting here who's been here for any period of time knows I'm a strong advocate of an embedded staff developer, and it's served us well. And I am certainly open to conversations about going in that direction moving forward, should we have the need to do so.
Okay, that's good information. Thank you for that. I have to ask only because I would like to know the numbers. What would the tax rate need to be to get our fund balance down to that $650,000 number if we were to go out at a higher than 0.23%? Only because, right, this would be a year to make a pivotal move in how we move forward. Reducing that fund balance to that $650,000 mark, what does that put the tax rate out to the public?
I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head, Bill, but what I will remind you is go back to the foundation aid slide with the gray, the blue, and the yellow. And remember, if we get what is promised, and I'm going to keep my fingers crossed, that 400 plus we got this year, or the 340, I don't have the number off the top of my head, will carry over to next year, and another 200,000 and change will be added to that, and then again the subsequent year. So these are not supposed to be one-shot monies. So I think putting a dent in it this year, knowing we're going to have potentially further capacity moving forward, continues us in the right direction to get there. And I have to say, I would be hard. I know it's only 0.31. I know it's only a small amount of money to our taxpayers. Kathy and I figured it out, you know, a little over $12 and change a year. But just like this year was hard on us as a school district in budgeting, this year was hard on a lot of members of our community who may not be in a position to bear even that $12.
Oh, I'm not, let me be the first to say, right, I have a problem raising taxes at all, right? But it's a necessity of life. I was just looking at the opportunity and what that number would be if we were to reduce it this year to 650. I completely agree with your assessment on the economy. Again, we have not begun to see ramifications of what's happening with COVID. A lot of people in the community are hurting. Our community, our surrounding communities, it's a tough time. I was just asking the question if that number was available.
But we can get you that number. I can't do it off the top of my head right now, Bill.
Thank you.
What is the village going out at again? Is it
3.1.
They moved a decimal point on us.
I was just going to say, I'm going to be hopefully optimistic about the foundation aid, because as long as I've sat on the board, that has always been a sense of area of contention for us. So that is very nice to see, and I'm going to remain hopeful. Just looking through draft budget 2, knowing nothing has changed, I feel very comfortable about draft budget 2. I'm very happy that the professional development is back with the diversity, because the more we sit in these meetings, we realize this isn't something that, whether we have the money or not, it's something that can be put aside. So that is pleasing. And just knowing the technology piece, because you're right, this is where we are now. And so we need to put the money there so that our children next year and the year after have what they need to be successful. So I'm very comfortable with budget 2.
I'll go next. I'm comfortable with budget 2 also. I appreciate the work that you and Kathy and all the whole team has done, and want to thank the legislature also for the fund balance increases. For the technology piece that we're talking about you're mostly hardware, right? Like they talked in a couple of the meetings that I was in about broadband access and things like that. But if I remember from some of the earlier meetings, that wasn't, broadband access in general wasn't an issue for us. We were able to fix any issues we had with hotspots and things like that. So we were able to address any of those needs with our kids, right? You're just talking about.
Yes, we actually remember that block grant we did with the town of Colony. We were able to secure hotspots for any of our students who would need them. And also through that block grant, Kathy worked very carefully with the town and with the shelter, and they actually did put wireless access at the shelter through that grant.
Right. Okay, and then I had some other questions, but I think you're going to address them in the next couple slides, so I won't ask them unless you don't.
And if you have them at the end, Courtney, certainly ask them.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, like everybody, I'm comfortable with budget 2. I'm comfortable with going out at the tax cap, whatever it may be at this point, however small. And I'm, pleased to see reduced use of fund balance to balance the budget. So that's I think a real positive step for us, and certainly positions us to be in better shape over the long term. So that's a real positive.
Everybody gone? Okay, I am in support of budget 2. Glad to see that it is so low. I mean, I think this is a year where we are getting a lot of money on the side, and so I'm an advocate as low as possible. I think if the village truly is going out at 3.1% with everybody hurting and all the extra money everybody's getting, I think that's a little irresponsible. I think we are being very responsible with this budget. We have a lot of extra that, once again, we take it year by year about what we're promised and what we're going to get. But at least going forward from what we have a very good budget here, and I just want to commend the staff and administration for putting this all together. It looks very good, and I'm in support of it.
Anybody else before I talk about that other money and what it may hold for us?
Yeah, that's where my questions are.
All right. Let me share my screen again. Give me a second. It's not letting me share. All right. See it? Okay. All right. So we do have other funding sources available to us. The COVID-19 Supplemental Stimulus Act, or the CSA. And if you look back to one of your earlier slides, that's kind of that red circled area that we're looking at. This funding, as I said during the presentation, is not only available to us next year, and it is not going to, like last year's CARES money, sit in our general fund budget. It will require a grant application. It's a process. It's a process through which we get a lot of our money, our Title I, our Title II. So it's a process we are used to. There will also be some requirements for posting information on our webpage, including our public through public hearings. We will do all of those things when we get the information we need to do that. And this pocket of money, this $303,000 and change, is primarily to be used at our discretion to keep students here in school. So we have a lot of flexibility with this money. So again, Bill, if we have kids who come back who have specific needs and there is a way we can use this pot of money to target it, we can do that. Unfortunately, we won't have all the detail of that information until the end of April after you have to adopt the budget. But we've had, Kathy and I, like I said, have been a part of numerous conversations and reviewed everything that's available to us, and feel very confident on what we've earmarked to go into these pots of money. The American Rescue Plan, or ARP, the larger chunk of money, is available through 2024, and there's even some conversation about getting that extended even further. Also requires a grant application, and for different districts, depending on how their formula calculation works, they can use it in different ways. For us, 20% of that has to be dedicated to learning loss. 80% is at our discretion. Now, if we decide we need to use some of that 80% to address learning loss, we can do that as well. And again, information on that will be more available to us at the end of April. The other money we talked about is the universal pre-K money. Right now, our allocation is $108,000. And I will tell you, there's still a lot unknown about this. This is going to require a grant application. The calculation was done based on a percentage of our current year kindergarten and how many kids we could provide for. I think several of you were on the NISPA conference today, or the webinar, and one of the questions came up that is a concern for me, to be honest with you. What if you have this pot of money, but you don't have the space to do it? So we've been asking a lot of questions about that because, quite frankly, $108,000 is enough to get us a body to do it. Is it enough to get us the space to do it? Not without doing some things creatively, but I've already started making those phone calls and having those conversations. Also, what we have learned, in addition to what was allocated specifically to districts, there is additional funding available through a competitive grant. And I would be more than happy to apply for the additional funding if we need to do that. I know pre-K is something that is important to our community. It's something we created space for, and that space went away because of increased enrollment. I will do whatever we need to do to bring pre-K to our community, utilizing this money and additional funds that are available. I'm just not sure what all the pieces and parts are yet. And as soon as we do, we will include our community in those conversations and let them know where we stand in that process. And then the last piece is the IDEA grants, which are those special ed grants that we get each year. One's a 611 grant, one's a 619 grant, with different purposes for each of those. We are being told that we should also anticipate an increase in those, perhaps our Title I grant as well, which we've seen significant growth in our Title I grant over the last few years. We just don't have any detail on that yet. So, I mean, I guess there's a lot to still learn and a lot to still understand, But the good news is this is a significant chunk of money that's going to help us help our kids beyond our regular budget.
Dr. Long, the idea grants, what kind of money figure are those? Again, I just don't have them in front of me. I know they show up.
One is, in total, I would say they're under $100,000, Jeff. We're not talking big dollars.
Okay.
But, Kathy's thinking ballpark 68,000. If it is a 20% increase like we're hearing, that's $12,000 that we'll find a spot for.
Yeah.
All right, Courtney, what questions do you have now that you saw those slides?
Okay, so I want to thank you for talking about both of these. I've had some questions from the community about the UPK. Like you said, there's a lot of interest in the community. It's hard to find good preschool options, good daycare options that try and get kids ready for kindergarten. And it would be nice to have our own homegrown program. When we get kids in from kindergarten or from the community, we get them at different levels and we meet them where they're at. But it'd be nice to have our own program and get to know the kids. So I'm glad that you're looking at it and working to make it happen. I wanted to ask the different, you mentioned spacing, we use that room that we had built. And I guess I just wanted to ask and make the community aware that when you're looking at options, you're looking at on-site and also potentially off-site locations, just so the community understands if we have UPK, it might not necessarily be at Menands School.
Correct. And to your point, ideally, I would love to have our own program and I would love to have it here. I don't know that we're going to be positioned to do that. That would be our ultimate goal. But if we can't get there and we can fund a program, then we would find a spot to put it.
Right.
Also, we have to answer questions like, is it a lottery system? Is it full-time? Is it half day? Is it afternoon? How many days a week? We have lots of questions.
Yeah, and I'm getting some conflicting information on that because in a lot of the documentation that's come out about the funding, it talks about full day 4-year-old programming. And our number allocation was 24 full day slots. And again, that was based on a calculation that every district had based on their kindergarten enrollment this year. But I don't know yet if we have the discretion, instead of doing 24 full day spots, can we do 48? I don't know. So, and again, I would love to include every child that would like to participate. I'm not sure we're going to get there.
Right.
We're going to do everything we can with the money we're given to provide programming for kids in our community.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And the other question I had about the other funding sources is one of the things we're considering summer school, either for this year or next year. When you talk about keeping students in session, I didn't know if you meant over the summer.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things they're promoting the use of. You have to keep in mind, we have traditionally had our own summer program. We were on hiatus the last 2 years, first because of the building project and then because of COVID. We had some Title I funds already positioned for that this year, but having these additional funds will create even greater opportunities. And actually at the regular board meeting next Wednesday night, Mrs. Canavo and Ms. Amatrano will be doing a presentation about what we're hoping to do that will be in far greater detail and talk about it.
Thank you.
So my only question, I guess, is just a general question with, some of this funding, every single bullet, under every headline, it says requires grant application. How, do we have any sense of how long, the process will take for something like this? Is this like 18 months we wait for something, or is this something pretty immediate? I know they're different.
Typically, and Kathy may jump in here, but Jeff, like I said, we already do this for our Title I, our Title II, our 611, our 619. We're now doing it with the McKinney-Vento. We had to do it with the CARES Act money last year. So basically, I would hope we're going to get approved pretty quickly. Again, we've got to do the public comment. We've got to have public hearings. We've got to run our plan through some hoops, and we should for this kind of money. Once we put the application in, we typically will hear back relatively quickly that it's approved. Then we may not get the money right away. We kind of,
doing our planning.
We front the money, they give it back. And, we have the opportunity, and we've done this year, to ask for it early, say, give us our money now. So it's a delay in the payment. I think the approval process will not be any lengthier than what we typically see in any of our other grant funded programs.
I only asked the question just from a standpoint of like, there's $804,000 there and we get approved for it and sitting out in front, but we can't implement any of these programs for 2 years until we've met all these hoops and such. So you've clarified that. So thank you.
Dr. Long, when you have to submit the grant application, and I don't know if you know this, are you submitting the plan of how you would like to use this money? Is that part of the application?
So actually, there's two different plans that it sounds like right now we're going to have to put forward. One is for anybody who got over a certain amount of foundation aid, which is us, and I'm not going to complain about, and I'm going to do whatever plan I have to do to get that. And there is a separate plan for the 800,000 money. However, there's a little bit more to be learned that our existing reopening plan may be able to be used for part of that. There's also some relief for districts with less than 1,000 students. We don't have to do as much as other districts. So we're still, the devil is in the details on that. But whatever plan they tell me I have to do and how I have to do it, we're going to do it.
Okay. And I was just thinking, you know, like you said, we're going to be getting information next week about where the students stand and, you know, as the year ends. And, you know, I didn't know how tight this plan had to be because we're still learning where the loss is and how much of the loss.
Right.
You know?
And I'm going to tell you, Jim, we're already ready to go with our summer program because we did have some money set aside in the Title I even before this. We've already posted for our positions internally, and we're actually conducting interviews as soon as the end of this week to fill those positions.
Okay.
We're not going to wait to be told how and when. We're going to keep rolling forward and be ready when it comes.
Okay. Good plan.
Anybody else? All right, so let me ask, we had another budget workshop scheduled for Monday night. It sounds like if we needed it, it sounds like we've come to agreement on the draft 2 budget and that meeting won't be necessary, but I just want to confirm that with everybody before we sign off and make sure we get that information out to our public.
How does everybody feel? Just if you want to raise your hand, yes or no?
I would say we're ready. I'm okay with going forward, and I don't think we need another meeting.
Right, what would the other meeting be for, just to say whether or not we're okay?
If you had told me tonight I'm
About that.
crazy and this is not the budget you want, then I'd have to go back to the drawing board, but it doesn't sound like we have to do that.
Okay, yeah, if we're only gonna meet again to say that we're okay with the budget that we already just said we were okay with, I don't see any reason to have it.
Jen and Bill?
I'm good to go forward. I'm pleased with budget 2.
Thank you. I'm good with budget 2.
I am as well. So all 5 of us are.
Okay, so we have a regular meeting next Wednesday, the 21st. Remember, that meeting is to align with the BOCES budget vote. Again, I know a number of you saw that information this evening. Thank you for attending. Sorry there was no dinner tonight. They talked about doing DoorDash. And I think we are in good shape here. Just have to pull off pre-board. Jeff, off the top of your head, who is up for pre-board with you? Do you know?
I don't. Who did it last time? Was it John? Or was it Jen or Courtney? I don't know.
I will check with Jean tomorrow. And we'll start, I mean, we've already started pulling together that agenda, and we will, you know, try to finalize that by week's end, and Jeff will reach out and find out who the other person is and see if we can set up pre-board by at the latest Monday of next week so we can get the packets out to folks.
Yeah, since we're not having a budget meeting, maybe we can do it, you know, just before that or whatever. But so whatever it is, I mean, I'm available. So whatever time and whoever's up, I'm very flexible, so I don't know what Dr. Long's schedule is, but
I'll make it work.
It must be me. I feel like it's been a while.
Yeah, I have some vague hazy memory of doing it last time, so.
I think it was you, John.
I think so.
Like I said, every day is the thinking. I don't know.
All right, I will, either way, I'll have Jean reach out tomorrow and we'll get it set up.
Okay.
All right, anything else for the good of the order?
No, just a thank you to you and Kathy and all of the hard work and the webinars you've been sitting on to digest all of this material. Very much appreciate it.
You are quite welcome.
Absolutely.
Yep, I concur.
All right, thank you all for your time away from your family. It is most appreciated too. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a great night, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.